Hello, everyone. Welcome to Perth Dialogues, another episode and another conversation. Uh, we all would have heard about the government bringing in 3 days of institutional childcare for younger Australians, our kids. And I am very interested and I'm very happy to have Jen Flemings with us. She is a prolific voice on this topic, childcare, and how we can make it better. So, welcome, Jen.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for listening to this really important conversation.
Oh, thank you for finding time for this conversation. It's a big topic, childcare, and which affects every family, which affects every new generation of Australians which are coming up, and we all want the best uh, facilities and opportunities to be provided to them. The government said that the more institutionalized childcare gives the best educational outcome for the children. Uh, and I saw your actually someone sent me your survey, which
Yes.
Childcare Choices is doing. So I was very interested in why is there a second voice? Like the government says it gives best educational outcome to the children. So why is there a second voice? What do you want to bring on the table and how the alternate voices bring in more choices and more better outcome for the children? So thank you for finding time for that. Um,
Sure. So there are a lot of questions there, and there are lots of things that we can talk about. I think the most important thing to start this conversation is to explain how the childcare system works in Australia. So right now, when you have a child, you have a baby aged between 0 and 12. The childcare subsidy is a payment that covers the first 12 years of life. But we're talking predominantly about that 0 to 3, that youngest part of infancy. When you need to go back to work or you want to go back to work, you are eligible for the childcare subsidy. That is a percentage of a childcare payment for a daycare centre or a long hours childcare centre out of your overall payment that the centre charges you, and it's based on your wage. What has happened recently with the 3 day guarantee is the guarantee of care regardless of whether you are working, studying or volunteering. Prior to January, a person had to be doing a set amount of hours in that space to be eligible for the childcare subsidy. That's been removed. So what it ultimately does is it guarantees care if you are able to find it. And this is where this conversation really opens up, because while the government is saying, yes, you can have 3 days of care, you have to be able to find that care. A lot of families have access problems with wait lists or geography, trying to get to a centre, particularly if you live rurally. And that's very common in places like Western Australia and Queensland, where I'm from. If you're not in a CBD area, you may not have a childcare centre down the road from you, and that childcare centre may not have places. There is also another side of this argument, which is people who have children with medical conditions or disability, and also people who choose not to use a childcare centre. They are automatically cut out of the system. So while there is a very big system in place for subsidising care, it only subsidises care in a childcare centre or an approved family daycare. For families like mine and millions of other families across the country, that is not a care model that works for our families. So what we're saying is the children who could be eligible for one if they used a childcare centre should be eligible for other forms of care, such as a nanny, a grandparent, being able to use something called a co-working space where there's close proximity of care, and also being able to stay home for longer if that is something that they wish to do as a mum or a dad. So that's really the very simple way of explaining what we're doing and what we're campaigning for. And our survey is a way for families to have their say and to tell us what it is that they would really have wanted or want from childcare.
like you talked about the childcare, and I saw the article, and it says institutionalized childcare. So what does it mean by institutionalized childcare?
Yeah, so what we're saying is things like industrialised or institutionalised childcare that become all but compulsory for families can present a lot of problems, and there is a lot of research done, particularly on that 0 to 3 developmental age of a person. We know that about 85% of a person's right brain is developed before the time they turn 3. So that period is very important, and there is no study on earth that suggests or finds that the best place for a child, particularly a baby, is away from a primary caregiver or a trusted person. What we know and what that research tells us in real life terms is that we should be trying to keep young infants and babies with their families or with a one-on-one carer for as long as possible. That isn't possible right now for a lot of families because the financial strain of needing to work often becomes the biggest priority. You know, rent doesn't stop and groceries don't get cheaper just because you have a young baby. They actually do the opposite. They get more expensive, and we need more space. We need a bigger house. We need more food. We need to buy nappies and formula and wipes and all of those things that add more financial pressure to a family's budget. And when you take away an income, when you stop working, when a mother predominantly stops working, that adds a very big financial strain to a family's budget. So childcare becomes inevitable because both parents usually need to work. We are saying that we need to look at more options. It shouldn't just be a long hours daycare where there is often a large changeover of staff, where there is often a high stress level for children being left on their own, away from families for the first time, and instead looking at those one-on-one care models, which for a lot of parents could be a grandparent. It could be being able to pay a grandparent to look after your children while you work. It could be hiring a trusted nanny. It could be having an au pair. There are options that speak directly to the fact of that one-on-one reciprocal care being very, very beneficial for humans, not, all humans, regardless of where you live. And we need to have that conversation. It's a tough conversation to have, but the research is very much pointing us in a direction that says that one-on-one care is best for people aged 0 to 3.
So we all understand the relationship between the mother and the child in the initial years.
Yeah.
And you are advocating for one-on-one care. You mentioned nannies and grandparents. How about the mother and the child remaining together? We don't actually send the children to somewhere else.
Absolutely.
But the mother keeps getting the childcare money subsidy, which the government will give it to institutions. Is that one of your options?
Yep, that is high on the agenda. So what we are saying, our main ask is to pay parents directly, not to pay providers. So we're empowering parents to make the decision that best suits them. That may be using a daycare centre, and that's what works for that family. That's what they should be able to do. But for a lot of families, like you say, there should be an opportunity to pay a parent to stay home for longer with their child. That not only that increases that bond with the parent and the emotional development of the child, but it also, if we're talking about it from an economic perspective, it also removes that stress and that burden that is already on the childcare system. They can't find places for children, they can't find staff, and they don't have enough childcare centres. So if we were to bring some of that care back into the home for the people who want to do that, and that is a big point, there are women who want to go back to work, who find a lot of value and reward in their job, and that's something that's important to them. This isn't about saying that they shouldn't do that and they must stay at home, but for the people who do want to stay at home, giving them that option and that financial support is something that the Australian government really should be doing.
Another question coming from that comparison is the government says that institutionalized childcare gives the better educational outcomes. On the other hand, if the child remains with the grandparent or the mother, it's basically they are just playing around and the mother is looking like it's a better option, but it's not the educational component or the better educational outcome. Do you see the difference there, or is it just marketing?
So I would say it is just marketing. I think as a mum, I don't believe that a 6-month-old needs an education. I believe that a 6-month-old needs a carer. They need someone who's going to respond when they cry. They need someone who's going to feed them when they're hungry and to read them books and to help them see the world. We don't need to sit a 6 or a 12 or an 18-month-old down with a maths book and say, here, learn some sums. Education is something that we know really benefits, and socialisation, from what we know about development of children's brains, it's about 3.5 to 4, where a child's brain actually ticks over to be able to play directly with another person. Up until then, children do what is called parallel play. They sit and they will copy the person sitting next to them. They will also look for a reciprocal, it's called a throw and return. So a baby will cry, they expect someone to pick them up. A baby will point and they want someone to look. Those things come from a one-on-one care model. They are very hard to achieve in a situation where you are in a room with one carer to 4 or 5 children. So when we talk about education, and that is brain development, really, the best brain development will come from having that one-on-one care model. I know a lot of, particularly migrant families, education is such a value and an importance in their household. It's something that they really strive for and encourage their children for, and that is something that makes our country better when migrants come and they have that real fundamental belief in education. What the research, though, shows is that education as a teaching really only shows benefit from about 3.5 years old. So when we look at that 0 to 3 model, it does become about having a conversation and how a baby learns. A baby doesn't learn from sitting in front of a chalkboard. A baby learns from having that interaction with a person, watching a mum's face and eyes or a carer speak to them. And that's how we know that there's education happening for kids.
Another difference, what the critics will talk about of your model, is that the people who are working in a childcare institution are trained, they are well equipped, they have licenses and all and certifications. The people in your model, nannies, grandparents, will not have that, certificates. How do you compare those two caregivers in your model?
So there's a few things. Not all people who work in childcare centres have a Certificate 3. It's not a requirement. There is a requirement for the ratio for some people to have that amount, and it depends on the amount of children that you have. What I would really push back on this and say that I don't agree with the fact that someone who's gone and done a TAFE certificate can make a better decision for my child than I can. I think as a parent, I know my children best and I can help them learn in the way because I know them. But I also think that if we talk about grandparents, we're talking about people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They have life experience. They've got careers themselves. Some people's grandparents might be doctors, nurses, teachers, truck drivers. They work in a cafe. They are people who run a business. Those people have skills. They've raised their own children. And I think they are very well equipped to have the ability to look after grandchildren and to help those grandchildren become the best people they can be. I don't necessarily think that because you have a Certificate 3, you are more qualified than someone who has 50 plus years of life experience and has worked a career themselves to look after a child. And I think that's detrimental to this conversation because it is that intergenerational connection that can really help people grow. I mean, I think about stories that my grandparents told me. Why is that, and how my grandparents raised me, and my dad is helping. He helps me one day a week. He's an army veteran of 47 years. I would say he has a lot more experience to help my children grow than someone I don't know who has a Certificate 3 in childcare.
If there are such good arguments towards your model of care for the children and childcare, and the government is supposed to be listening to all those voices, why do you think the government has pushed even more towards institutionalized childcare? Were they not listening to the parents, or the parent voices was not that much important compared to other stakeholders?
Well, that is a very good question. I would love to know the answer to it. I don't know why the government is pushing down this road. I think for a lot of, if you look at the history, particularly from this Labor government, they have consulted with people who own childcare centres, they've consulted with unions, and they've consulted with people who work in childcare centres. All of those people are incredibly important to this conversation. They need to have a voice. Who is missing from this conversation, as you point out, is parents. What we're living and what we're being told is not the same thing. And I think we've lost sight of the fact that everyday families live a very different life to just 9 to 5. There are shift workers, there are people who are FIFO workers, there are people who live rurally and remotely who cannot fit into a normal model of childcare, that traditional model. And for those families who do, they are most likely, for most people, receiving a very high quality of care. Our educators do an excellent job and they are very well equipped to do that. That in itself, yes, there are flaws in the childcare system right now and there needs to be reform in that space. The government has acted in a lot of those ways and they are strengthening the safety requirements and the safeguarding of children, but also they have done a lot of work to encourage more people to work in the sector, retention payments, increase in pay. That's very important for those who do choose to work in childcare and do an amazing job. What we're talking about is the people who can't access the system. And we've been forgotten and we've been left out of the conversation because we aren't engaging in the childcare system because we aren't using it. So therefore we haven't been spoken to. So those parents ultimately deserve a voice as well. This is not about pitting those who use childcare against those who don't. It is about saying that all families with young children deserve a care model that allows them to get ahead and allows them to continue earning a wage. So for us to do that, we need to make our voices heard, which is why we've brought out the survey, because up until now, those families haven't been part of the conversation.
I do have some questions on your survey.
Please.
What the outcomes are. But when you talked about the stakeholders, which are the childcare owners and the unions and the people who actually work in there, my experience with my childcare when the kids were in there was that every time the government increased the subsidy money, the childcare will increase its fees. So though there's no benefit coming to the parent, I was paying about the same money or even higher every time the government increased the fees. So is it that we are helping the childcare providers, the institutions, to get more profit margins out of this without any benefit to the parent or the child?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers alone, the answer to that would be unfortunately yes. It's about a $16 billion a year system, the childcare subsidy. And there are companies that are making millions, if not billions of dollars a year from the care of our children. There are a number, I think it's almost 400 that are offshore listed. There are childcare companies that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They're making so much money. So yes, this has become a way to make money. It is a business, and that is where things have started to go wrong, because it's become more about money than it has about the children who are in the care. And I think that is one of the reasons we're seeing some of the horror stories that we're seeing on the news right now. About the alleged abuse, about the alleged neglect of children in childcares, and all of those horrific reports that we can't ignore but are very hard for parents and all Australians to watch when we realise this is happening. And one of the reasons we can point to is the for-profit sector of childcare being about money, and that's a rhetoric. It's not proven, but it's a very easy correlation to make. And I might be wrong, but I think as a parent you can see that those things are lining up. So yes, there are people making a lot of money from running childcare centres right now. One thing I think I would say personally on that is what makes Australia great is we do encourage people to start a business and to be entrepreneurial and to have success. So this isn't necessarily about saying that businesses shouldn't be able to have childcare and to have success in that space. What this conversation is really about is giving parents choice. So yes, people should still be able to run childcare businesses and they should still be able to make money from that. Yes, there should be a very strong not-for-profit part of the childcare industry, because we know that has good outcomes for children. My child now goes to a not-for-profit community kindergarten and she absolutely loves it. So we know that they have a really big role to play. We know that family daycares also have a really big role to play. Where we're losing sight is that there are so many parents who don't or can't use those models and do need or do want a different model for their children, and they're left out. So I think the other point with this is there is a very big complementary workforce when it comes to this policy idea. There are a lot of people who would love to care for children, the people who are studying, maybe they're studying medicine or they're studying nursing or they're studying something in allied health, or they've worked previously in childcare and don't want to anymore. So there is a big workforce, complementary workforce to this policy as well. There are a lot of economic benefits where those people can continue or start to earn a wage in this space too. So yes, we do need to have a conversation about money. Yes, there will always be a space for people in Australia to succeed and to have businesses that do well. But we need to bring this conversation back to dinner tables and to those dinner tables covered in crumbs, because it's those people with those young children that that need this more flexible model now.
We talked about the institutional providers. Now I'll come to the people who actually work in childcare. We have seen a big push from the government to have more people get into childcare trainings and get accredited and work in these things. We don't see those people. It's a crunch situation. I have friends in childcare who says they can't find workers. So, and especially in rural areas where there are deserts and there's no one for 100 kilometers. So do you think with your model, we can start at least in the rural areas where there is no childcare? If there is a childcare, there's no workers in there. So we can start from there and then build towards CBD areas and then see how your option works and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So our dream model, if we were talking pie in the sky, how this would look, it would be that this childcare subsidy, as it currently stands, would be directed directly to the parent through their Centrelink payments. So to get the childcare subsidy now, you need to go through Services Australia. You need to register. You put in all of the details. You put in your work. You put in the centre that you're going to, the amount that you're paying, all of your wage, all of those details to give you your percentage. Instead of that payment then going to the childcare owner, it would go directly to the family. So you would receive that payment as a weekly, fortnightly payment. And what you do with that is up to you. So you can keep that to stay home. You could give that money directly to a nanny. Or you could give it to your childcare to pay for your childcare that you already make a payment to and then you top up. So there are lots of ways that it could work that way. The other way it could work is that you have, for example, if we take what you were saying, in a rural area, for someone who cannot access a childcare centre, but they have someone who is willing to be a nanny or a grandparent for them, that carer, the person who is providing the care, would become a registered provider with Services Australia, which is currently how the home daycare system works. So if I was to start a home daycare, I would become a registered provider with Services Australia. And just as Services Australia pays a childcare centre, they pay me to run my family daycare. They would pay the person who was providing that care to the family on the farm or the family rurally, and then the family would pay the top-up amount for whatever the amount of hours was required for the week, just as they do for a childcare centre. There are a lot of ways that this can happen. There are a lot of ways to slice and dice this to make it a reality. I think that I don't know the answer to that. I'm not someone who's sitting in the department and can see all the back end systems to understand how it would work. There have been previous pilot programs done in Australia about paying nannies for rural areas. There is a current in-home care system, but it is very underutilised, very expensive. So what we know is that for the things that we have now, if you take rural families or families with medical conditions as your examples, there are systems that are meant to work for them that are not. So how this would work, yes, you could definitely do a pilot program that focused on rural areas to test it first, and to roll it out in that way. That would absolutely be something that we would welcome and say that yes, let's do that, because those families are in a dire need. You know, you mentioned the word childcare deserts. Those people, that's just not a marketing term for them or a talking point. That is real life. They drive hundreds of kilometres round trip for one day of childcare so they can do their off-farm job, or they go without. So yes, absolutely. I think that would be a great idea and a great way to approach this with going to the regions first.
Coming from your model where the money follows the parents or the child itself, we have another system where the money follows the person involved, which is the NDIS system. The money follows the person. But within the 4 years from 2022 to 26, the budget for it has grown from 23 billion to 46 billion today, doubled. Do you think, or is there a risk that if we introduce your model of the money following the child, everyone starts claiming and suddenly the blowout is something to the childcare budget from 16 billion to say 30 to 40 billion dollars, and the government has no money to pay anyone?
Yes, so there's a few points with that. Right now, about 1 million children use the childcare subsidy each week. So 1 million people put their child into a childcare centre or an after-hours school care program. We estimate that there's actually about 2 million additional children around that system who are currently eligible but are not using it. There's a few points to make. Anthony Albanese is currently moving our country towards what he is calling a universal childcare system. That would mean that all children have access to care at a significantly lower rate. The problem with that policy is there are not enough centres, and there are not enough places, and there are not enough workers. There is also the flip side, which we've been talking about, that there are a lot of families who don't want to use the system. If you talk about the money aspect of things, it's about $16 billion a year for the childcare subsidy that Australians pay, taxpayers' money. For me, if you take me as an example, my children do not go to a childcare centre right now. If I was to put them into a childcare centre tomorrow, they would be eligible for that, and that would ultimately contribute to that amount of money. So the childcare system is budgeted in a very similar way to the NDIS, in the sense of it is an unlimited almost, it's an estimates-based system that at the end of each year they get their cost from. So there might be a huge spike in the amount of people who use the childcare system in the next 12 to 18 months that then would see that $16 billion rise. You would anticipate that will happen as people have more children and move into the space anyway. So it's a very hard thing to talk about in terms of budgetary requirements for this, because you just don't know who's going to take it up. You don't know how many people are going to have more babies and use more childcare. It will obviously be something that increases in our government spending anyway. So I think that there obviously will be a natural increase. This policy would add to that, but the benefits of what we would see in terms of women being able to return to work on their terms, it would see a complementary workforce open up of people earning more money, and that money then ultimately goes back into the economy. That's not how it comes out in the budget bottom line, but there are those positive flow-on effects that we can see if this policy was to come into effect. You talk about the NDIS. I know a lot of people worry about the spending around the NDIS, and I think that that's a very, very fair thing to bring up. There is also a lot of fraud in the NDIS system that we know about. When we talk about the NDIS, it is very easy to get caught up in those things, and I think anyone will tell you that there needs to be changes. The NDIS ultimately needs to be refined to go back to who they were ultimately created to serve, and that is people with high needs disability. We're talking about people who need help with their personal care. They need help getting in and out of their bed every day because they can't do it. They need help navigating the community. Those people need this support, and the NDIS allows them to have that choice over who's providing the care. If you look at how disability care was previously funded in Australia, it was funded in a way that was block funded. So a person would have a baby with cerebral palsy, or they would be an adult with, say, cerebral palsy, and they would be told by the government who would provide their services, what services they would receive, and when they would receive them. There was very little that person could do to change that service provider. There was very little they could do to expand their service remit. It was a very constricted system. So I personally believe that the NDIS came into effect with the right idea of putting that choice back in the person with disabilities' hands to empower them to choose who provided their care. Obviously, with government money, people will misuse it, and I think that is wrong, and it needs to be the priority of the government to shut it down, and we would be saying the same with our system. There needs to be safeguards in place to restrict fraud and to ensure that the money is going to a child's benefit.
Another thing on your model, which I was thinking, is that once, say, I put my child to my parents or their grandparents' home, government loves regulation, paperwork and filling. Now my parent house becomes a kind of a childcare or a daycare or something. So now the government will come in and say, I need to check every nook and corner of that house for it to be ticked so you can send the child there. At the moment, there's about 11,000 childcare centers across Australia. It will rise up to, say, $100,000 childcares, because every granny's house is a childcare center. Do you think that will push away the interest of people to get into the system because there's so much regulation and so much reporting to do?
That certainly wouldn't be something we would want to see happen. I don't think the government is going in to look at houses of families now, and I certainly wouldn't be saying that if this policy was to come into effect that we would need to be looking at where that care was happening, because we don't do that now for families, and we shouldn't be doing that just because of grandparents who are providing free care as they are now. A lot of grandparents are doing this for free. There are a lot of grandparents who can't because they're still working, which is what we're saying this needs to be opened up for. There is a lot of regulation around childcare centres, and there rightly should be. They are a very different care model and a very different way of providing care than the one-on-one care that happens in a home. So my strong reaction to that would be no, there would be no need for that to happen. There may be a requirement of the person who's providing care to show that they have relevant understanding of things such as safe sleep for babies, how we need to put babies in a cot and that safe sleep around that. But for the most part, that would just be in a first aid certificate and a blue card. Those sorts of regulations that we require of other people providing care to children in other settings, like a play space that you take your children to on the weekend. Those sorts of things, a creche for your gym. Those things that are a different model of care, what we would be asking for is a first aid certificate, is a blue card, of course, which is the requirement we have in Queensland, a working with children check, it's called in other places. And also maybe something around, safe sleep or feeding and those sorts of very basic general understanding of what a child needs in a day-to-day setting.
While I was thinking about this childcare in Australia, because it's not there in India, so when I came in and I've been thinking, say for example, it's just my thought experiment. Childcare is not for child and not for mothers. Childcare is a model of creating a wealth transfer from whoever we can tax and give it to a possibility to the mother that get your child away and get into the workforce. You are worried about the child, we'll take care of the child in the child care and we'll pay them separately so you don't have to worry about it. But now you are free and we want you into the workforce so we can suppress the wages, because more people in the workforce, more less of the wages. And that also then creates another whole sector of childcare providers, people who work in the childcare, the regulators, the testers, the assessors, and all that. If I go back to the model where we pay the mother or the family, this whole sector has to go away because then there's kind of no need for it, especially in the first 3-4 years of the child's life. Do you think where I'm coming from? And what do you think of that?
Yes, I understand what you mean. However, I don't think that that is possible. I think that the childcare sector will always have a place to be in our country, and I think it's fundamentally a very important part of helping women go back to work. There are a number of conversations here, and I think that what we need to bring it back to is just giving parents that choice. For a lot of mums, and I speak as one who's been through this myself very recently, you do feel a pull to be close to your children, and that is a maternal biological thing that we cannot control. We want to be close to our children. We want our children to be safe. That happens the moment they're born. They become the most important part of our lives. For a lot of women, though, we also still want to work. We want to contribute. We want to have our own income. We want to have our own identity outside of motherhood. And for a lot of people, that comes from our job. And that's where this conversation does become very tricky, because we are pulled in different directions. We do want to be close to our children, but we also want to maintain a career that for a lot of women we've worked for 10, 15, 20 years to establish before becoming a mother. There is a societal expectation that women will all go back to work. And that doesn't work for some people. And this is where we really need to have this conversation and to say the things that we're saying, is that for those women who really do feel that strong pull to be at home, who want to be able to be with their children, who want to be the ones who raise them for those 3 to 5 years, they should be able to do that. And we should be allowing them to do that and supporting them to do that. On the flip side of that, for the women who want to be a mum but also be a boss and work in their career, they should be allowed to do that too. Right now, those women can only use a childcare centre, and it is restrictive for those women who can't access or don't want to access a childcare centre. So we need to bring this back to mums and babies. We know that mums and babies should be together for as long as is best for them, and that's where we're coming at this conversation about, as you say, get back to the workforce, contribute to the economy, earn a wage, do all those good things so we can tax you more, but we aren't having that human conversation. And everyone is different, every child is different, every mothering experience is different. If we don't give mothers that choice, we put them in this completely impossible situation of having to choose. And this policy would give families the right to pick what suits them at that time, and to pick what suits their child and their career and their family and their income and their budget at that time.
This is one of my another observation, that only in childcare is it that the government says that we will pay you if you get your child away and you start participating in the economy, right? If you don't do it, we got nothing to do with you. So we don't value you. Your value comes only if you participate in the economy. If you go and work and do something and pay taxes. Everywhere else, healthcare, you are as a human. In NDIS, you are as a human. Every other care sector, you are a human. Only in childcare, you are seen as, are you a working mother or are you a non-working mother? Do you think that dehumanizes the mothers?
Yeah, and I think any mother listening, regardless of where you are from, when you become a mum, it almost becomes you are split. You know, there is this split between, did you have a natural birth or did you have a cesarean? Do you breastfeed? Do you formula feed? Do you co-sleep? Do you sleep train? All of those things are used to split mothers. We are split into categories of our choices around our children. We are split by them, and childcare is fast becoming another way that mothers are split. We are divided by whether we stay home or whether we work. And it almost becomes this competitiveness of, I'm a better mum because I stay home, but I'm a more successful woman because I work. And neither of those things are beneficial to this conversation at all. We are better as women when we support each other, and we are better as mothers when we support each other's choices. That's where this policy comes into play too, because it gives the power back to the woman and the parents and the dad as well. They're obviously, for a lot of families, two-parent families make those decisions together, but single mothers make them on their own. Single dads make them on their own too. It's about bringing it back to the household, to that dinner table that has toys and crumbs and a half-eaten banana on it, because that's where that family is making that decision, and that's where that policy is impacting the most. It's that family and that family home. We need to give people choice. We cannot just tell women that once your baby is 6 or 12 months old and your paid parental leave runs out, that you must go back to work full time. Because for a lot of parents and for a lot of mothers particularly, that pull is to be closer to their families. And what we're seeing is mums are making flexible work try and fit around their lives so they can do both. So they can do the school play, so they can go to the birthday party, so they can do the swimming lessons and the music lessons with their toddler and earn the income that keeps their family afloat. They do things like flexible work. They work at night times, they work part-times, they take weekend jobs, they make their own businesses from home, which is what I did. I started my own small business from home so I could be with my children and I could earn the income that my family needed. So mums are superheroes. We're making it work around this desire to be close to our kids, but to also work and the need to work. Mothers can't sustain that without support though. And that's why we need this system to be opened up, so those who can't or don't want to use a childcare centre can still work if they want to, or as you say, can be at home for longer, which is becoming more and more rare because of the need to earn an income. My concern with where the government is going now and the policy that they are pushing with the industrialised, almost compulsory childcare, is that things like staying home with your children, being a stay-at-home mum, or things like family daycare will become all but extinct, because long hours childcare will become anything basically compulsory.
You mentioned about breadcrumbs on the floor and paintings and things. You recently in your LinkedIn post actually mentioned all that and then invited Anthony Albanese to come into your home and see all that. Tell us about that.
I would love the Prime Minister to come to my home, because right now he is saying that the best place for a child is in a childcare centre. My family is living a very different reality to that. We used a childcare centre and it did not work for our daughter. It was a very traumatic experience for all of us, and then what we did was we found care that worked for our family, which is a grandparent care and is also a nanny. We pay a nanny 2 days a week, which allows me to work. And what my question to the Prime Minister and my request to him is come and see how my family lives. Come and see the craziness of my household at 8 o'clock in the morning as I pack a kindy bag and type some emails for work, because I'm juggling both. But come and see the fact that my family is thriving and my children are thriving and healthy and happy, and they don't go to a childcare centre. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad mum for not choosing to use his model of care. In fact, he needs to see that there are so many of us out here choosing different models that he's choosing not to support. So my invitation still stands. I would love the Prime Minister to come to my house and see how my kids love the care that we have for them and it works for them, but he is choosing not to subsidise and not to support my choice as a mum to pick something other than a daycare centre.
I think it's a good time to talk about your survey.
Please.
So what your survey is about, If it's closed, have you seen what kind of responses are coming in?
Yeah, so our survey was started for this very reason of parents not having a voice. Politicians aren't asking us what we want, and there are so many of us who are saying we want more choice. So we started a survey. We thought, well, let's get the numbers. Let's show the government how many families and the percentage of families in all different cohorts. This is not just for people who have childcare aged children now. We want to hear from everyone. We want to hear from the people who are thinking about having children, the people who are grandparents or may become grandparents. You know, all of those people have a right to have a say in this. It's wrong that we haven't been asked, which is why this survey has been started. It's been running for about 2 weeks now, and we've had a massive response. All of the people, we haven't done a data analysis yet. It's still open. We will run it for a number of more months. We want to have a very big cohort of people fill that in so we can demonstrate the need. We could publish the results now. We've had a few thousand responses. We want more. We want to show that there is this big unheard voice of families and of Australians. So anyone who's listening, I would really love for you to take 3 minutes of your day to fill in the survey. It's quick and online, and it's at childcarechoice.com.au. To have your say, as I said, you don't have to be a grandparent looking after young children now. You don't have to be a parent to young children. Every single Australian should take this survey.
So now that you have the survey, and if the Prime Minister actually comes to your home, what's one thing you want him to implement today?
We would like him to expand the choice around what is subsidised care for children. So we believe that the system should be opened up to subsidise things such as nannies, grandparents, co-working spaces, and parents staying home.
On that positive note, I think we all work together, and hopefully the choice underpins the policy and not just a buzzword on
Absolutely.
Policy documents.
That's right. And I think for that to happen, we need all of your listeners and everyone who you know, your friends and family, your neighbours, to get involved in this campaign. So follow us on Instagram. We're on Childcare Choice AU. Go to our website and take the survey and share your voice.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for your
Thank
time,
Nirmal.
and thank you for
for
sharing all
having
the
me.
insights.